You're watching For the Record. Once again, here is your host, Jim Needleman.
Welcome back. A threat to close the border with Mexico from the president. A plan to restore the voting rights of felons in Iowa hits a stumbling block, and a lot of local governments in Illinois are working around tough gun laws. We'll talk about all those issues this morning with Democratic political consultant Kevin Perkins and Iowa Republican Party Chair Jeff Kaufman. It's great to see you both, as always.
Good to be here.
See ya.
We'll start with gun laws and governments that are avoiding them. We've heard the term sanctuary cities used a lot as it applies to illegal immigration. Though it turns out there are also sanctuary cities and places that want nothing to do with restrictions on gun rights, and there are a lot of them in Illinois. In fact, 62 of 102 counties in the state adopted some form of sanctuary resolutions vowing not to enforce these laws. How effective can gun laws, or any laws for that matter, be if this happens, and can or should anything be done about it? Kevin, what do you think?
Well, just let me start off by saying I grew up in a small town in Indiana. My dad was a bailiff at city court, my brother's state trooper. We grew up around guns, and so I'm familiar with the gun culture and appreciate that. That being said, I think we're conflating the immigration issue with sanctuary cities. That was put in place oftentimes because law enforcement, they don't have the funds to actually enforce federal law. And so now you reverse that, state law, they don't want to enforce it. I mean, if their argument is they don't have the funds to enforce these laws, that's one thing. But if they're claiming Second Amendment, I don't buy that. You can still purchase a gun, you can still own a gun. So,
Jeff?
I think this is a slippery slope that extends from sanctuary cities for immigrants. I have a problem anytime a local government is attempting to forego or get around a federal law. I have a problem with sanctuary cities for immigrants because I know of many situations where criminals that should be locked up have a safe haven there. I also get a little anxious, quite frankly, about sanctuary cities for gun rights.
For gun rights too. So you think because you see the slippery slope, where picking and choose what laws you have to obey.
Yeah, I think that's a dangerous place to go when you pick and choose which laws you're going to follow in the level above you, especially when with the Constitution and the Supremacy Clause so very clear.
There is an argument to be made for getting the funding to enforce those laws, however.
I'm worried about saving lives right now.
Iowa Governor, moving on to another topic here, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds made it clear earlier this year that she supports a constitutional amendment to restore the voting rights of convicted felons who paid their debt to society. A measure to do that cleared the state house, though the Senate was the stumbling block. It turns out the Senate Judiciary Committee won't vote on it before the upcoming final deadline. That will stall it for sure. How much of a setback is this for the governor and for Iowa, Jeff Kaufman?
Well, for full disclosure, my son was the manager of the bill in the House, so
okay.
This was a priority for Governor Reynolds. There's no doubt about it. I know there are concerns in the Senate in terms of if there's going to be any exceptions to that.
They wanted some parameters in place,
absolutely.
Right?
And here's, being a former legislator, you always want to think of the General Assembly as a 2-year stint. That bill is still live. It does not have to be reintroduced. It's a governor's priority. Knowing Kim Reynolds, she's going to continue with that. I think it has a bright future throughout the General Assembly or the 2-year period.
Kevin?
Well, I think it's the right thing to do. I look at this at a moral thing, the right thing to do. I mean, if you lose your right to vote, that can impact not only you, but it can impact your family because politics reaches, everything. And I would take it a step further. Not only we need to amend the Constitution, but I don't even think that people that haven't completed their sentence need to lose their right to vote. They still have families out there that they need to be able to vote for if there's something that's going to impact their family.
Jeff, what do you think it'll take to get those Republicans on board who aren't so far, that basically killed it for this year?
I really think in that Judiciary Committee, the conversations around the parameters, the process, is there going to be any initiative on the part of those felons that are now released to actually take the initiative on their own to receive that? Should there be some steps there? And then, of course, there are some crimes that probably merit losing your vote permanently. Crimes against kids, rape, murder. I don't think there's going to be an appetite for the legislature to give those rights back.
Well, we'll follow that closely as well. President Trump went back and forth on his threats this week to shut down the border with Mexico. Democrats aren't the only ones who oppose this. Most Republicans see this as a potential economic disaster. The last thing President did was sort of back off of the threat, but he does change his mind relatively quickly on things. How seriously should Americans take it? And what do you think about what seems to be impulsive behavior here, Kevin?
Well, it does seem to be typical behavior for this president, and I think people have started to bake that in with him. So I think a lot of people tune things out initially and wait to see with him because he did backpedal. I think he got pushback from all sides. And he decided to say, look, I don't want to ruin the Americans' economy. And the fact of the matter is that's one thing that he can't afford to do. So I think that's the reason why he backed off. Now he's put it back another year. We'll wait to see what happens in a year, if he's going to implement tariffs. He's still, on that same sort of track that he was, but he's just backed it up a year.
Jeff, it's interesting to hear the words he uses, because even when he says he's going to not do it, he says he's still reserving the right to put it back.
I mean, he's frustrated. We have got a crisis on the border. Democrats know that we have a crisis on the border, and there's absolutely no attempts at compromise. People that voted for a wall are now against the wall. People that understand that we have issues. There's another caravan coming. We have kids that are being separated from their families, and kids that are being used by people, amnesty laws that are being abused. We have to find a solution. I think what
but closing
you're
the
seeing,
border doesn't sound like a right solution.
Well, and that's why he's backed that off. But at some point, there has to be something done. If you listen to the ICE agents, and I'm not talking about the politicians, I'm talking about the ICE agents on the border, across the board, they agree with this president. We got to do something.
Well, you can't defund Central America and expect any results good from that. That is not an answer either. When you have violence in those countries, you have climate change that's ruined some of their agriculture. That's why you're seeing this sort of migration. So you have to approach this intersectionally. You just can't pick and choose. You have to look at this holistically, and that's not going to help by defunding.
I didn't know it was our responsibility to fund Central America. I think we'd have a hard time selling that in the heartland.
Well, we aid a lot of countries, certainly, to provide a lot of foreign aid around the world. President Trump also renewed his fight against the Affordable Care Act recently. The Justice Department filed a brief with the Federal Appeals Court arguing to throw out the health care law entirely. Republicans are conflicted a bit on this. There are reports Senate Republicans want the president to lose in court. They fear it could cost them in next year's election. The issue played a big role in the midterms, to be sure. So what are the political implications at stake? Jeff?
Oh, Republicans have to have an alternative. I mean, I've always said that, and I think even before Donald Trump was elected, Republicans knew that what they were against in health care, but to be real honest with you, there wasn't very specific details on what we were for. We have to, if we're going to replace Obamacare, and there's no doubt that Donald Trump is the president right now, one of the key issues was to end Obamacare. We've got people now not being covered. We've got skyrocketing costs. It's a failed system. But I will give the Democrats one thing. When they ask Republicans, what are you for in health care, we better have a specific answer.
Kevin, you have a different take, I'm sure, on that.
Well, my take is you've had 10 years to come up with a plan, and there's nothing there. Do we need to work to improve the Affordable Care Act and maybe even go further with a public option and things of that nature? Absolutely, and those are things that we have always been in favor of. But to not have a plan and to say I'm in favor of the courts simply stripping the Affordable Care Act altogether and leaving our health care system in total disarray, that is political malpractice.
$32 trillion Medicare for All plan being pushed by the Democratic candidates for president would not only leave our healthcare system in disarray, it would allow our entire country and economy in disarray. So both sides definitely need to firm up what exactly they want to do with healthcare. One thing we know, and that is the American people expect us to do something.
And work together, I think, as well.
I will concur with you on that.
Jeff Kaufman, Kevin Perkins, thanks for the conversation. That brings us to our question of the week. What do you think about the president's latest attempt to eliminate the Affordable Care Act through the courts? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com or respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.